like, hey there man, I totally didn't see you there. Hello, my name is Matthew, and welcome to Preserving Memories, where we take precious, though vulnerable pieces of our past and refresh, renew, restore them back to their original glory. And today, we will be digitizing the compact cassette tape. Remember these? Preserving Memories is a comprehensive guide of sorts. I've taken all the roadblocks and all the questions that I've had and compacted them down into one. So if there is only a portion of something that you're looking for in this video, YouTube has made it possible to separate your video into chapters. So feel free to skip to that section that you're looking for at any time. Otherwise, and without further ado, it's time to get a little retro. Let me introduce you to the compact cassette tape.
First created by Philips in 1964.
The ingenuity is in the name. Compact, durable, compact, durable, compact, durable.
Each side runs up to 45 minutes of continual playback.
Nostalgic?
Nostalgic?
You cannot truly appreciate the digital age without first remembering the wonder of the analog.
If you want high performance from your tape deck, get the high performance tape.
I knew that I had a lot of cassette tapes left by my dad that I really wanted to digitize, or at least go through. I just didn't realize how many I had. In total, 248. That's a lot of hours. And as you'd imagine, it took a lot of time and even a little bit of research to be able to digitize up to 248 cassette tapes. Depending on what kind of tape you have, it's about 45 minutes per side. And so deciding exactly how I was going to transfer each one and the process therein, I had to do quite a bit of research. The process was just a little bit more extensive than I thought. There are a number of different ways that you can turn analog into digital, and I had to decide which one was best for my situation. Of course, the sooner you digitize your tapes, the better, because especially after 30 to 40 years, they run into a number of potential risks. And some of those risks I have faced with the tapes that I have tried to convert. Despite some of the strain and struggle I went through in facing these roadblocks and difficulties, I also had a lot of fun. I learned a lot more about my dad, of which most of these are his, and I grew to really appreciate the reason why these are trending the way they are today. In order to restore and preserve the items that mean a lot to you, understanding the history and the elements of what they're made of is more important than it may appear. And the more I learned about the cassette tape, the more I saw the genius of its design, and the better I was able to take on this fairly daunting task. And we can't start talking about the cassette tape without bringing up the first invention to ever record sound, the phonograph. It didn't take long for this to quickly be replaced by flat recording and magnetic wire recording, introduced around the same time the phonograph was. What made this more advanced was its ability to record one's voice and surroundings on a more widespread and affordable level, several decades later. This is the first recognizable version of the cassette tape we all know and love. This was followed by the reel-to-reel. Inventors really got creative during the 50s and 60s, which were very formative years for modern sound. Some reel-to-reels of notable interest include the EL3581, the Philips dictation device, and the Stellophone, an easy snap-and-load device introduced in 1957, a very iconic precursor to the cassette tape we, again, all know and love. But then came the RCA sound tape cartridge in 1957. What an amazing resemblance! This highly complex device spent years of time and money in development, but unfortunately, long story short, it could never fully get off the ground. After a few expensively priced devices later, it all came down to a competition between the Grundig Cassette DC and the Philips cassette tape, which was originally invented by Philips in 1963. Philips met with Sony in Japan, and another long story short, the iconic compact cassette became widespread. Because Sony didn't have to pay Philips any licensing fees for using the compact design, many other companies followed suit and copied and sold the same design as well. There was one more rival you very likely have heard about, the 8-track, invented by Bill Lear in 1964, but the compact cassette tape won out to it as well. Then came the CD, the digital compact disc. Cleaner, more permanent, and arguably a little bit more versatile. But then came digital download. And this is where we find ourselves today. Magnetic recording, meaning that if you left a cassette tape beside some other magnetically polar opposite device, you would have learned a valuable lesson, hopefully never to be repeated again. Just about all magnetic recording is done by a process called imprinting. We have two parts, along with many other components. There is the recorder itself, which is used for playback, and the tape for storage, the original hard drive. The tape itself, the reason it's called magnetic recording, is made of a polyester plastic film with magnetic coating. This coating is a chemical component known as oxide, and is a ferromagnetic material, which is what causes it to unscramble the data as well as to erase completely when brought into contact with something magnetic. Completely unreeled, the very geniusly designed and mass-produced ferromagnetic oxide cassette tape runs about 443 feet, or 135 meters. That's about half the length of the Titanic, man. Just as there are multiple digital audio formats, there are also multiple analog audio formats, and it will help you in your digitization and forever preservation of these cassette tapes to know the different types that you'll be working with. There are 4 generations of cassette tape types, each one more advanced and arguably of better quality than the last. You can often tell which one is better by the color of the magnetic tape, from light brown being the most basic of quality to almost black being the best of quality. But I have found out that there is an even easier way to find out what type of cassette tape you have, and that all begins at the very top of the cassette tape. You will see little nodes, if you will. Type 1 has single nodes, Type 2 has double, Type 3 doesn't matter, Type 4 is similar to Type 2, but with 2 extra nodes in the middle. I personally had no trouble in converting Type 4 in the method that I used, so I'd like to think that you shouldn't have any trouble either, but I would highly recommend to separate each one into their distinct categories so that you have a better idea of what you have to work with. Each generation comprises of different magnetic properties and levels of bias. The bias is a combination of things, but essentially it is the frequency of the audio signal as it is recorded. There is the AC bias, which is added to the signal to help reduce distortion inaudibly through high frequency signals, and the DC bias, which adds direct current to the recorded audio signal. The first 2 types of cassettes have elements of ferri, cobalt, and chromium dioxide, which combined together becomes ferric oxide, or Fe2O2. These are the magnetic coatings that help make the tape more than just the polyester plastic film that the initial material is made of. The first generation, Type 1, was, albeit the most basic. While Type 1 sounds decent, it is known to have bad treble, and the high frequencies were not very good. The second generation, Type 2, is a little different. The ferric oxide is mixed with chromium dioxide, making the frequency greater. The short-lived Type 3 tried to combine Type 1 and Type 2, but it didn't work out very well. It was a little dysfunctional as it was hard to balance the high and low treble, so there was a limited amount of copies made and became unavailable very early on, and it is highly unlikely that you'll have a Type 3 in your collection. The fourth generation, Type 4, is a highly advanced version made of pure metal. It was expensive when it came out, and it is still expensive today. It also requires a special type of player. It's like the difference between DVD and Blu-ray. So if you happen to have these, which is pretty unlikely, but not as unlikely as having Type 3, digitizing these may take a few extra steps, but they are by far the greatest of quality. I have cassette tapes all the way back from the 1970s, all the way up to the later part of the 90s. And each one has their own unique features in both aesthetic design as well as quality of audio. Most of them, as you would imagine, are Type 1 and Type 2s, and mostly Type 1s. But I did find a few Type 4s and was a little more excited than I expected to be. Which just goes to show how important it is to know your history, bruh. There are undoubtedly a number of ways in which you can convert your cassette tapes into digital. One way is to take an original Walkman, find an adapter, and do it that way. Pretty simple, right? And there are a number of adapters that you can find at fairly reasonable prices online. You can also connect your original Walkman to a lav and connect that to an adapter, which will give you better sound quality more likely than not. You can put your cassette tape into a high quality cassette deck and put that to an adapter and have a high quality version of your tape that way. Or you can go my route and purchase a digital version of a cassette tape Walkman and convert your cassette tapes this way. These are very simple. They are just like Walkman, except that they have modern USB inputs that connect to audio programs like Audacity. The great thing about Audacity is that it is free to use and free to download. I have linked the connection to the official website in the description. I originally wanted to find an adapter and use an original Walkman, but this option was all in one, and so I went with it. Now, I can't attest to other brands which have almost the exact identical design as this particular digital Walkman, but I can proudly say that this is more than adequate. Let me explain. It does the job. I want to say that it is far from high quality. The plastic is thin and the USB adapter can be sensitive, which can be frustrating when having gone through over an hour of real-time transfer. But this happened very rarely, so for the price, it was well worth it indeed. One thing that made purchasing a digital modern Walkman worth it is that once it finishes on one side, it automatically starts recording the other side without the need to flip it. This can be a lifesaver at times, especially for continuous play. There are a variety of free software programs available to upload your cassette tapes on, which I will have linked below. But Audacity is a great platform to use to transfer your audio because it gives you immediate control over everything. There are some other conversion options where you plug the adapter into a flash drive and it just automatically records onto it. But with Audacity, you can see and fix and change everything right then and there rather than checking afterwards onto an SD card or flash drive. I have put links to some very helpful Audacity tutorials in the description. Make sure that when you plug in your USB adapter that the input and output are correct. You can experiment by recording to see if it is indeed recording. Input is where it comes from and output is where you hear it from. I opt for both the headphones that the digital Walkman comes with as well as the speakers in my computer so that I can test the range and the volume. Remember that you are transferring your cassette tapes in real time, which means that it can take up to and even more than an hour and a half to transfer both sides. And that is a big reason why I really appreciate the auto reverse in these digital Walkmans. I could be working on something else while also eyeing this very carefully in the distance, and I'm free to have a very productive day. There are quite a number of file types out there, and you may jump right away to saving these all as an MP3, But this may not be your best option. The MP3 format compresses the file and potentially makes it harder to edit later on if you want to improve the audio quality for whatever reason. WAV files are completely uncompressed. They are significantly larger, but it's well worth it if you want to potentially do anything to the audio file later. And here's the thing. You can convert a WAV into an MP3. You can convert an MP3 to a WAV as well, but does it really uncompress? I would recommend saving all files as a WAV first and converting them later if you want to. It will take up more space, but 2 and even 3 terabyte external hard drives are very affordable nowadays, and you don't want to store these precious files straight onto your computer anyways. External hard drives are the much safer route. Now, as much as I've learned to appreciate these cassette tapes, I don't want to keep all 248 of mine. I have enough stuff as it is. And I don't want to throw away any of these cassette tapes, as I'm sure they are valuable to someone who would really appreciate them. I do, however, want to erase the contents of the ones that I'm not keeping, and so I'm going to experiment with a magnet. I happen to have a set of very powerful polar attractive magnets on hand, and I've come to find that this method works very well. You're going to want some pretty strong polar attractive magnets because of how thick the cassette tape is. You're going to put each side of the magnet on either side of the cassette tape, and to be very thorough, you're going to go up and down, back and forth, and around in circles. The more thorough you are in using the magnets to descramble all the sound in the cassette tape, the less noise you will hear. In fact, if you're thorough enough using all of these methods, you won't hear anything actually, which I was pleasantly surprised to find. I can see why they have machines to descramble and essentially erase the cassette tape, because it goes a little bit faster than manually using a magnet, and because it does a very thorough job of erasing the cassette tape. But using a magnet works just fine if you're willing to put in the time and the elbow grease, so to speak. It was with this last final step that I was able to separate the cassette tapes that I wanted to keep and the cassette tapes that I wanted to get rid of somehow. Now, there are several different ways of disposing of the cassette tapes you do not want anymore. I've seen sellers on Etsy as well as eBay sell them for aesthetic purposes because of how unique they are. Now, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with the cassette tapes that I don't want anymore, but I'm going to try to find them a good home that will appreciate them. My name is Matthew, encouraging you to explore locally and to preserve the beautiful things of our past for future generations. But then came digital download. There are no doubt a number of ways in which you can digitize your cassette tapes. And one of the ways is by taking an original Walkman, putting it in, and finding an adapter. We're almost there. We're really close. This video is sponsored by Pacific Coast Sleep. Looking for a new mattress? Pacific Coast Sleep is a personable, privately owned business that ships around the US, offering a variety of bed types and brands, including M. Lily, Maxim, Seahawk Design, Futon Pillow Design, and more. Mention my name, Matthew Richards, to get 50% off your purchase. Ask about free delivery. Links in the description below.
FM ハイポジションハイビームサウンドマクセル UD2